welcome back. We are going to go over the maritime geography of the eastern United States. Why is geography so important and why are we studying this? Well, it's all about the Navy and shipping, right? We're going to learn about trade routes. We're going to learn about the different areas that are strategically important to the entire world and how the Navy fits in, all right? So where did we leave off last time? Anybody remember? Well, as you can see, this ship, they're getting ready to enter into the Suez Canal, right over there in Egypt. Now, the Suez Canal is important because it was the area just outside of the Mediterranean, one of those strategic choke points as we're getting ready to head down to the south. It's approximately 80 feet deep, about 120 miles long, and 200 yards wide. It's only 2 football fields wide. All right, those big ships have to go through there. They're passing through, and there are about 50 vessels every single day that go through this area. And you can see 120 miles, very narrow channel, go through there every single day, back and forth. They're emptying out into the Red Sea here, which is a little bit bigger area, but it's still, fairly narrow. There's not much there. It's very, very salty. It's warm. It's about 1,300 miles from the Suez Canal, which we just learned about, all the way down to the southern area, which is the Bab el-Mandeb Straits. It's about 90 to 100 miles wide, 169,000 square miles. But in its deepest, in the trough here, it gets down to about 9,580 feet deep, right? Almost 10,000 feet. And that's the Red Sea. It separates Africa from the Arabian Peninsula over here. And it's a major shipping lane throughout the region to try and get from the Mediterranean to all these other areas over here. Some important ports to learn about up in the north. Port Said is really the entrance to the Suez Canal and down to the Red Sea. And then down on the south is the port of Djibouti. Yes, that's how it's spelled and that's how it's pronounced, Djibouti, right? They're a strategic partner with the United States. We've been doing a lot of stuff in that area. And we even have a base down here at Cap Lemonnier. We have several different countries operating there. The United States is one of them. We do a lot of anti-piracy there. Just because the Horn of Africa is such a volatile region, right? And there's so much shipping, and it's such a poor country up in Eritrea, up to the north here, and then down in Somalia. You might have heard of Somalia, Black Hawk Down. That piracy, because there's so much shipping, is huge. So we're trying to do anti-piracy, establish some stuff there. But right across the bay there in Aden, in 2000, the USS Cole was bombed while in port. That was before September 11th, and that was one of the earliest Al-Qaeda attacks on the United States. If you can, I'll pull it up here. If you might remember a little bit about the USS Cole, big bomb hit the side of it, killed several sailors. And like I said, one of the first attacks on the United States by Al-Qaeda. We've talked about some of the strategic geography, but really, like I said, the big thing is all these different shipping routes that we're gonna learn about, right? Shipping is huge all the way across, and a lot of it goes through this Red Sea here. It moves up into the Persian Gulf, we're going to talk about next, which is up in here. You may have heard of the Persian Gulf, but you can see it's pretty close to this strategic area. Why is the Persian Gulf so important to us? Why do we even care about any of this at all? The Persian Gulf is pretty contested region for centuries, really. Up here to the north, you've got Iran, right? Over here is Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia. A small country you may not have heard of is Bahrain. The United States has a lot of strategic allies there. We'll be talking about that in a minute. Qatar, UAE, and then Oman over out here to the Gulf of Oman. But that's the Persian Gulf. You can see Iran to the north, very close. Right here in Bahrain, as we zoom in, United States has a presence because it's kind of in the center of the Persian Gulf, and we've had that presence for a long time. Lots of plankton thrive, sustaining a very large fishing area. And to get into it is the Straits of Hormuz. That's the area over here, right? And everything that goes through that strategic choke point there. It empties out into the Gulf of Oman. Out here, where most of the shipping then proceeds out into the Indian Ocean. All the regions in the Persian Gulf, like I said, oil is very, very important. It's going to be one of the major producers for all of the world. The United States imports about 40% of its annual oil needs from that area. Europe, about 70%, and Japan, almost 90% of its oil comes from this area here. So very rich drilling area. They've got a lot invested, and we've got some pretty good alliances with them. As you can see, it all comes out this way and starts moving out into the Indian Ocean. So where's the Indian Ocean? Well, that's the next thing, so we're going to kind of roll over to here. It's the third largest ocean, consisting of 26 million square miles. On average, it's about 12,600 feet deep, and the deepest point is 24,000, almost 500 feet deep in the Java Trench. 10 million tons of fish annually come from the Indian Ocean. That's about 7% of the world's fish supply. And why is that? Well, we talked before, you've got all this shallower ocean, fairly calm, and lots of coastline. So people can easily get in and out. They can get to fishing, get in, and then get to these shipping lanes to move stuff around if they need to, right? There's not a lot of U.S. ports here, but there are some places like Singapore, major hub that we utilize, some Thailand. So there's some things that we kind of work with, but the United States doesn't really operate out of there. The only one that we really have is over here, this little small island called Diego Garcia. We're going to move down to Australia, which is actually one of our allies. You can see that they're pretty important because they're right there in the center of all those shipping lanes, all those little islands up there. They're the ones who are trying to bring peace in a lot of the areas. So they have a fairly good navy, and they're kind of patrolling a lot of those shipping lanes too. Then moving over here to the Pacific Ocean, it's going to be the largest ocean in the world. 59 million square miles. That's 35% of the Earth's surface. Now remember, the Atlantic was only 29 million square miles, so significantly larger, 30 million square miles larger than the Atlantic. So when you start talking about those distances, you're talking about huge areas that we have to cover. It can take several weeks to move ships from one side to another. So trying to protect those ships so they're not having to take longer routes is very important. It is the deepest ocean in the world, in the Marianas Trench, 36,161 feet in the deepest part. The Atlantic was only 28,000 feet. We talked about that being pretty deep because Mount Everest is 29,000 feet high roughly. So you're talking about significantly deeper areas, and that's over here in this Marianas Trench. Once again, you can kind of see this seam going along. Well, that's a very tall mountain ridge under the ocean. It goes, like I said, down to 36,000 feet, and you can see it drops off pretty sharply. It's this plate moving here, pushing up all these things, and then you can see this little dots of islands coming down all the way down here. It's kind of just the top of that mountain range. Now, one of the great features of the Pacific is the Great Barrier Reef down here in Australia. 1,250 miles long. It's a barrier reef. You can see the ridge right there going from north to south. Very long, very impressive. It goes all the way and gives some protection to the islands there. Now, ports. Ports, from the United States perspective on the west coast, they're going to be all the way, we have them down in San Diego, Los Angeles, Long Beach as we move up the coast, not too far from Los Angeles, Oakland, about midway up, Tacoma, Washington, Seattle, Washington, Anchorage, Alaska, and then Honolulu, Hawaii. So we're kind of surrounding, everything in the United States, able to kind of have good ports, so we establish those trade routes. Now the naval bases along the West Coast, San Diego has lots of naval bases. We're going to kind of zoom in over there. Several naval bases down in San Diego. We've got Marine Corps Air Station Miramar up to the north also, but then an air station, a naval base where all the ships are docked. We've got some telecommunications bases and submarine bases out here. So once again, protected harbor, very good area to keep ships in. Up to the north, we've got Naval Air Station Whidbey Island. And there's also a Bremerton, Washington has also got a naval base that has a couple more ships, but the main one is really down there in the south in San Diego. It's got a majority of our fleet. And then out there in Hawaii, also Joint Base Hickam, which is both a Navy and an Air Force base. A little bit further to the around the globe is Naval Base Guam. There's also an Air Force base on the island. So that's great. We just kind of zoomed all the way around without really understanding how far that is, right? Well, this is Naval Base Guam, right? And this little island, and there's the Air Force base up on the northern half, right? So there's this little island. There's that trench that we talked about, right? Sitting right on the edge of that trench. Yes, there are a lot of volcanoes. A lot of earthquakes. As you can see, the Naval Base Guam on the edge of that ridge, right? In the Marianas. Way over here is Hawaii, and then way over here is San Diego. Japan. Japan has a maritime self-defense force. After World War II, their constitution said that they could not have a military that is able to do offensive things, so they have just a defense force. Well, the United States has an agreement with them that if they're ever attacked, that we would protect them. So we work do a lot with Japan. And that's why they allow us to have these bases like at Atsugi and Yokosuka, things like that. But they have a couple of other bases of their own throughout Japan. Last thing is the Southern Ocean that we'll talk about. This actually is a continent. This is not the ocean. The actual ocean kind of goes a little bit further out. It's kind of arbitrarily drawn at 60 degrees south, just to kind of separate it from everything else. It's only about 7 million square miles, average depth of 13,100 square feet or 100 feet. And it's about 1.5 million square miles are frozen year-round. It's too difficult, too expensive to mine for minerals. Really, the main industry down here was whaling. That happened, throughout the turn of the century, all the way up to the 1930s. But as ships got better, weaponry got better, we just started destroying the whaling population. And today, only 10% of the whales survives because we had so many advances in technologies and didn't really think about what we're doing to the population. We were able to save about 10%, but some of those are just going extinct. So really, we have to kind of think about what we're doing with technology. But there are 30 nations that conduct scientific studies in the South Pole, and the U.S. Navy helps to maintain and supply these stations. But under international treaty, you can't have any sort of military operations in the South Pole, just because nobody is supposed to claim it or own it. So that kind of gives a very quick overview of all of the world.